Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show is brought to you by Air Patrol North. Visit airpatrolnorth.ca. Our guest today, Dan Shulman, one of the greatest broadcasters this country has produced. He might just have the best voice in the business. Joe Tilley's Great Canadian Sports Show. Coming up! Our guest today hails from Toronto. He is a graduate of the University of Western Ontario. He was the host of Primetime Sports on the Fan. He called baseball, basketball, hockey for TSN, has worked for ESPN since 2001, calling baseball and college basketball. He is the Blue Jays play-by-play man on Sportsnet. He hosts Swing and a Belt podcast. He has called Canada's bronze medal win recently at the World Cup of Basketball, currently calling MLB playoff games. He was inducted into the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame, winner of the Jack Graney Award, nominated for the Ford C. Frick Award, Best Voice in Play-by-Play. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program, Dan Shulman. Dan, great to have you here.
Wow, that is very kind of you, Joe. It's great to see you. Thank you for all that. I that's a long list of accomplishments. I'm starting to feel old looking at that. I guess that means I'm rounding third and heading home right now.
Oh no, I think you're still in second, buddy. You're doing pretty good. You got a lot left, and look at Vince Scully, for crying out loud, and guys like that. So looking, knowing you from before and looking back in your bio and whatever, you're a self-proclaimed math geek. And what made you want to think that you were going to be an actuary?
So I remember back in high school, one of my great friends, his name is Jeff, and we were driving around one day, and I said, Jeff, I don't know what I want to do. I don't know what I want to study in university. This is probably back in grade 12. As you and I know, we used to have grade 13. That doesn't exist anymore. So probably grade 12. And he said, well, you're a math guy. And he goes, why don't you be an actuary? And I said, what's an actuary? I had no idea what it was. And of course, you couldn't Google that kind of thing. There was no internet back then, but it was heavy, hardcore math. It was about insurance and pensions and mortality rates and investments and payouts and things like that. And I didn't know what else to do. So I decided to do something in math. It was either that or be a math teacher or an accountant. I really couldn't figure it out. So I decided to give being an actuary a try. I went to Western and majored in statistics and actuarial science, and could never have foreseen the sharp right turn my life would make just a few years later.
I can't believe that Jeff didn't say, Dan, you should be, calling games on Sunday Night Baseball on ESPN. What the heck?
No, at 17 years of age, that had never, ever crossed my mind. I mean, I was a sports nut. I'm sure I was very much like what you were when you were 17 years old. I, lived and died with Toronto teams. And well, there weren't as many Toronto teams back then, but I lived and died with Toronto teams and loved the NBA. This is pre-Raptors, and loved football and all that. But, I didn't know anybody who made a living in sports or anything like that. So, I was brought up to get, have a respectable career. And, that meant either being a doctor, a lawyer, or an accountant. And an actuary, I always rationalized it was kind of like a branch on the accountant tree. And when I ran it by my parents, grandparents, very traditional family and all that, everybody was excited. So off we went. But I was my first, second, third, and fourth favorite subject when I was a kid. I took every single math course you could take in high school and university. Loved it, loved it, loved it. That part of my brain is not functioning quite as well as it did when I was 17 years of age. But math is where I was headed originally.
Okay, so you're an actuary in training and starting to be an actuary, from what I understand. How do you venture out of that field into the sports biz?
So if we go back to my first day, literally at Western, first day of Frosh Week back in September of 1985, my parents had always instilled in my sisters and me, don't just go to school, get involved with something, join a club, do something and all that. Mm-hmm. So I took it to heart to a certain extent. I wanted to write for the Western Gazette, which was, and I assume still is, a terrific student newspaper. And so I leave my dorm room at Saugeen, and I walk over to the UCC, the big community center in the middle of campus, and I find the office for the Western Gazette, and there's like 200 people in line. And I'm like, "What's this
Wow.
line for?" And they're like, "Well, we're trying to volunteer for the Gazette." And I was like, I don't have it in me to stand in a line of
No.
200 people. So sorry, mom and dad." But and so I started walking back to my room and walked past a door. This is a real sliding doors kind of moment. Walked past a door. It said Radio Western, and I knocked on the door, and somebody said, "Come in." And I walked in, and I said, "Is this the campus radio station?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "Do you do sports?" And they said, "Yes." And I said, "Do you need volunteers?" And they said, "Yes." And a week later, I was helping out at a Western Windsor football game for CHRW, the campus radio station. And for the first 3 years of my 4 years at Western, I did everything I could do there. I had a talk show. I called football games, basketball games, a little bit of hockey. Um, it was also kind of like my place, like my Norm at Cheers bar kind of place. Like that's where I hung
Yeah.
out. They had a bubble hockey table there, and a bunch of us would play. And I just loved it. I actually stopped in my last year, my fourth year at Western, because I wanted to make sure I, maxed out on my marks and my job interviews. And to be an actuary, you have to write a series of exams too outside of school, and those were very challenging. So I didn't do any radio at all in my fourth year. Graduated, started work as an actuary, and honestly, Joe, within like 3 months, I said, I don't think this is for me. And my bad dad joke is I had my midlife crisis at 22, which I heartily recommend for people. Have your
Yeah.
midlife
Yeah.
crisis before you have kids and a mortgage. It's much simpler. And went to my parents and said, "You know what? I want to give radio a try." And I said, "I'll make you a deal. Give me 2 years to see if I can do anything with it. And in the meantime, I said I'll write the GMAT, which is like the MBA entrance exam if you want to go to get a master's degree at a business school." And I wrote the GMAT, and could have deferred, got my mark there, could have deferred acceptances, that sort of thing. So I had that in my back pocket, and I said, "Give me 2 years to see if radio works." And nervously, everybody in my family went, "Okay," and it worked out.
Well, when was the moment that like, what was it exactly that you said, I can't be an actuary. I got to give this radio thing a try. Like, when was that moment?
Yeah.
Like, what was it?
So I can't remember a specific moment, but I remember the feeling. And part of it was my dad was a dentist.
Mm.
And my dad, he passed away a couple of years ago. He was the most wonderful man I ever met in my life. And the only time he ever changed was Sunday nights. We would watch some football, and then 60 Minutes would come on, and we'd watch 60 Minutes. And sometime after 60 Minutes, like Sunday night, his personality would change a little bit. He would get just tense, quiet, and he didn't love going back to work Monday morning. He
Uh,
didn't really have a choice in what he did. I mean, he had to do one of a certain number of things in order to help the family and things like that. So, um, yeah, I saw how he felt on Sunday nights, and I just internally said to myself, "Whatever I have to do, I have to do it for 40 years, so I may as well be happy." And I guess I'm not very good at doing something when I'm not happy. And because after like 3 months, I started to feel like what I thought my dad felt like on
yeah.
Sunday nights.
Yeah.
So I decided to make a change, and obviously, I'm very happy that I did. It's worked out well, and I love what I do, and I've had so many great experiences and memories and relationships and that sort of thing. But it really goes back to kind of watching my dad on Sunday nights.
Yeah. That's great. That, to catch yourself at that age. I mean, can't believe like how many guys started their careers, gals too, in campus radio. Like Jeff Merrick,
Mhm.
who was on, a couple weeks ago, and then before that we had Steve Paikin and all these individuals that started their careers. Me, I started. I was at the University of Alberta, and I was taking drama. I was going to be an actor, so not exactly the same kind of nuts and bolts
Yeah.
guy that you were, I guess. But yeah, it was we just didn't sit right. But start doing this broadcasting stuff, and you know what? There's the bug gets you, right. The bug gets you.
Oh,
So when you're on the radio and at the University of Western, I mean, there's a lot of people must be listening. Like, wow, that guy's got That guy's got quite a voice. I'm sure you've heard that many times throughout your career. Is this something that you worked on, or is this something that just came? That's it, naturally.
It's funny, when I was 18, 19 years old, I don't think my voice was quite the same as it is now, but my dad and I had such similar voices that he used to like pretending he was me, like if he answered the phone. Like if a friend of yeah, yeah, real fun joke. Like if, there were no
Yeah.
cell phones then. Yeah, you had a one phone line in your house, right? And if somebody called a friend of mine, or maybe the twice in my whole life a girl called the house or something like that, he liked to pretend he was me. So I think I just got it from him, to be honest with you. I never really did anything. When I started doing stuff at Western, your friends are your friends because they can, they say mean things to you. And like a couple of guys at Western were like, you don't stink. Like you're not terrible at this or anything. But I never, honestly, in those 3 years that I did it, and I did it a lot. I bet you I called 40 or 50 basketball games, a bunch of football games, did a talk show once a week for 3 years. Like I did a lot, but not for one moment did I ever think maybe I can do this for a career. And not once did anybody ever say to me, maybe you can do this for a career. It was just a fun thing that I was doing on the side. I was 100% committed to becoming an actuary until I got out into the workforce and decided maybe it wasn't the best choice.
Right. So tell us about getting the job at the Fan and how that transpired.
So my first job was at a station called CKBB in Barrie, Ontario. For those who don't know, I was about 50 miles
Mhm.
north of Toronto. And so I'll back up for a sec. When I'm an actuary and I decide I want to get into radio, again, for people who are, say, 40 and under, imagine a world with no internet and how hard these things were. And what I would do is I took out the phone book for the Toronto numbers, but sometimes I would just dial like Kitchener information, Guelph information, Kingston
Mm.
information. And I would say to the operator, what's the name of the all news radio station in Kitchener? And maybe they would know, maybe they wouldn't. And if they
Yeah.
did, they would tell me, and I would say, can I have the phone number for that? Or can you put me through? And you knew it. You'd pay like 60 cents or whatever it was for an information call. And
Yeah.
I'd get
Yeah.
connected to the radio station. And then somebody would answer, a receptionist, and I would say, do you have a news director? And they would say, yes, we have a news director. And I would say, can I speak to your news director, please? And then maybe I'd get through to that person, maybe I wouldn't. And then that person, I would say, hi, my name is, and this is my situation. And I don't know why I knew to say this, but I always said this. I always said, I'm not asking for a job, but I was wondering if I could drive out to your station and give you a tape, a cassette tape, which is what we used back then, I
Yeah.
think you know,
Yeah.
of my work, and just, get some tips from you about how to get into the business. So I bet you I tried to call 40 to 50 radio stations. I bet you I got through to 10. I bet you five of them agreed to meet me and one offered me a job. And that was at CKBB in Barrie. And I got offered a job to be a Saturday, Sunday morning newscaster, which I had never done in my life. I had done basketball games and a talk show. I got offered a job to be a Saturday, Sunday morning newscaster for $6 an hour, and I took it. I didn't quit my actuarial job yet because my radio job was Saturday, Sunday. For about 3-4 months, I had to have been the only combination actuary newscaster in world history. Like nobody else ever could have done that. And after about 3 or 4 months, somebody who worked at CKBB went on maternity leave and a job opened up and they offered me a full time job. So I took a job in Barrie. And I worked in Barrie for about 18 months and learned an unbelievable amount of stuff because I didn't have really any background. I didn't take a journalism degree or a broadcasting degree. Like I was
Right.
doing stuff at West, but I really, there was so much of the business I didn't know. And I was covering elections and court cases and doing newscasts and weather and traffic reports and in memoriam listings and the pet patrol and everything you could think of that happens at a small town radio station happened at CKBB in Barrie. Met some wonderful people, learned a lot from all of them, and was there about 18 months. And then a friend of mine from university who lived in Toronto literally knew somebody who knew somebody who knew somebody who was an executive at CJCL. It wasn't the Fan yet. It was CJCL.
Right.
It was the music of your life. It hadn't even gone all sports yet.
Yeah.
But they did, as you know, they had the Blue Jay games and the Leaf games, and they had a little bit of a sports presence in the evenings and that sort of thing. And I met with John Ray was the station manager, and he put me in touch with Scott Metcalf, who was the news director. Who, without him, I'm nowhere. And he listened to my tape, and he said, "Okay, there's something here, but you're not ready yet." He said, "How about every Friday when you're finished work at Barrie and you drive back down to Toronto, you come here and we listen and bring me some newscasts and we'll listen." And we did that for about 2, 3 months. He sat with me every Friday and air checked me and went over it and over it and over it. And eventually it turned into a part time job down there.
Wow. I'm thinking back to when you like I did the same kind of thing. Got a bunch of addresses and started sending tapes out to all the school or all the stations in Alberta, pretty much, and ended up getting a job in Red Deer. But I think back, and you said 5 interviews, and one of them hired you, and out of those four that turned down Dan Shulman, to me that's like cutting Michael Jordan from his high school
I
basketball
have,
teams.
well, I thank you for that. But I mean, I think of two things. One is, I think people on the outside sometimes think like people like you or me or whatever, we just show up and it's an overnight success sort of thing. It's the exact opposite.
Yeah,
It could not be
yeah,
further from the truth.
yeah.
But I have a letter. I won't say from who, and I won't say from what radio station it's from, but you know the station and you would know the name. Now, this is back in the 1980s. And the
Right.
letter says, "Thank you very much for your tape. Perhaps you are better suited for," and it was something like, the Peterboroughs or the Kitcheners of this world, all the best, something like that. So I don't keep it with any. And I haven't looked at it. It's stashed away in a file full. I don't keep it with any bitterness at all. I keep it to remind myself to follow your dreams and to work hard, and that if you work hard enough and you have some ability, you can get places maybe that people don't think you can get. And I totally get it. Again, I didn't have, listen, I've heard that cassette that I submitted in 1990 to try to get jobs. And Scott Metcalf,
Yes.
who used to teach in addition to running a radio network, he would play my cassette to his students as an example
Right.
of, look how bad he was then and look where he is now. So, like, it wasn't good. I don't blame people for not giving me a chance. I'm just grateful that CKBB did, because if that one station hadn't, like, I had exhausted. I kind of just went through every station I could think of in Ontario. I don't know if I expanded beyond Ontario, but if that hadn't worked out, I might have gone back to business school. Like, this might not have gone anywhere. So I'm always grateful for that.
Yeah, I got the same. It wasn't a letter, there was a phone conversation at CKCW in Wetaskiwin, and the news director said, "You know what? I just don't think you have the ability to work in this market, in a market this big. So I think you're better suited for some of the smaller, because this market was
Yeah,
relatively close to Edmonton. It was there you go. But you
yeah.
keep plugging away, don't you? Like, I mean, before that, you never know, because that break could be just right around the next corner, as I'm sure it was.
Yeah, one of the things, if I'm asked to speak to a class of students, young, high school, university broadcasting students, whatever, one of the things I say to them is, you only need one yes. Whether you're 1 for 1 or 1 for 50, all you need is one. I mean, you'd like to have 10 offers to choose from, but the world doesn't work that way. And I think it's way more competitive than it was when you and I were young. I don't think I could get into the business now without having a proper background. I didn't really have a proper background back then. So, but you only need one yes, and it can be discouraging. That's the hard part. It beats you down emotionally when you keep getting no's, or they don't phone you
Mm.
back or anything like that. I
Hmm.
don't envy. I've got children who are in their 20s, right? Who are going through this or who have been through this. It's discouraging. So it was a whole different world back then. But I try to tell people that all you need is one yes, and then make the best. Run with that situation, because that may be the only chance you have.
Well, so what happened at the Fan? Because you've got some opportunities there. And
Yeah.
how did things
Um,
unfold for you there?
So, well, very quickly, I did that. I did it my first weekend of Saturday, Sundays. And when I came out after that, the 12 p.m., I think it was Sportscast, I was doing 3-minute Sportscasts on the hour. Scott Metcalf was sitting there, and he said, "We jumped the gun on this. It's a little bit too soon, not quite ready." So I went back. I was still in Barrie Monday to Friday, because they had offered me a Saturday, Sunday. So it was my second stretch of two different jobs, a 5-day a week and a 2-day a week. So I was taken off the air after one weekend. It took me about 3, 4 months to get back on. Um, they put me back on because they went back to having newscasters do the sportscasts at
Yeah.
CJCL, and they just, as they were transitioning into more of a sports station, they just wanted
Hmm.
people who had more of a sports background. So eventually, I got back on, and I did weekend sportscasts for a while. And then I started like filling in on the evenings a little bit here and there. And then came word, Alan Davis was the program director at the time. And again, we all knew we were going more sports and heading towards all sports, but it was not a sports talk station. There were no talk shows on the air, to my
Hmm.
recollection, at that time. Maybe Bob McCown was already doing something, but that was it. In the evenings, we had Leafs or Jays, or it was the music of your life. I remember sitting in it wasn't even a lounge. It was a room with a couch and a fridge that we sat in when we weren't on the air sometimes. And I was sitting with Todd Macklin, who was a young producer, helping out behind the scenes. And Alan Davis walked in and he said, "You two," he said, "as of this weekend, we're going to be all sports 5 p.m. to midnight. When we don't have a Leaf game or a Jays game, you're on 8 to midnight. Have fun." And walked out of the room. I was 25 and Todd was 24, and we just looked at each other and went, "Holy, like, what do we do?" And this was like 3 days in advance, and we did it. We put a show on the air, and we got stringers in other markets, "Let's go to Edmonton and hear how the Oilers are doing. Joe Tilley, what do you have?" Phoner, what I mean? And
Right. I remember
we would
those. Yeah.
do we would do interviews, we would take some calls. I didn't have a co-host, it's just me. I had no idea what I was doing, but God bless Alan. He saw enough that he said, "If I throw these 2 in the deep end, they'll swim." And we barely swam, but we swam. And so I started doing an evening talk show when the Leafs and Jays weren't on. And then I don't remember how much later, a year later, maybe we went all sports. And when we went all sports, then they moved me to the midday show, the 12 to 4 show, noon to 4. Um, Again, no co-host, except I would cross over. Bob McCown was doing 3 to 7 at that point. So the 3 to 4 hour, I was with Bob and Barb DeJulia. We did an hour together, but I was doing middays. And then eventually they made a change on the morning show, and Bob McCown went to the morning show, and then I went to primetime sports for um, 2 years, kind of from 1993 to 1995. And so I was at the Fan in total, maybe 4.5, 5 years, and did a bunch of different stuff. Did some Blue Jay pregame and postgame shows, a little bit of Maple Leaf pregame and postgame, but I had more of a baseball identity, I think. On the talk show, we talked baseball a lot. We talked basketball a lot. And again, this was before the Raptors were there. I remember Alan Davis walking into the studio as I was doing a show like in 1994 and saying, "Stop talking about basketball so much. Nobody cares." And like 2 months later, Toronto got an expansion franchise. And he walked in and he goes, "Okay, now you can talk about basketball." So I was able to start doing that. But it was great. They gave us a lot of freedom. Almost everybody working at the station was in their 20s. We were just learning on the fly. At that point, there was WFAN in New York, and I think one other talk sports station somewhere in the US, and then us. Like this whole thing was really in its infancy. Nobody thought we could succeed. Nobody. And as you'll remember, there was a baseball strike and a hockey lockout right in the mid '90s. We went months without having games to talk
Wow.
about at times. So you can't learn more than I learned in those couple of years, but I'll always have very fond memories of my time.
What was it like working with Bob and eventually following in his footsteps on primetime sports?
Yeah, it was a little bit intimidating at the beginning. I mean, Bob was a very established person in the market. He was a star, obviously, and he was great to me. But it was a little intimidating at times. There were some areas where I thought we clicked seamlessly, and some areas where it didn't come as naturally. It wasn't my whole time there. It was maybe a year, and we crossed over for 1 hour. So but we had fun. I learned a lot from him. He had great connections and a great way of interviewing people and a great way of putting his opinions on the air. I mean, you can't learn as a young radio talk show host, which is what I was then, and what at that point that's what I thought I would always be. I didn't know I would end up doing play by play, but you can't learn more from anybody than you can learn from Bob McCown. I mean, he's everybody knows what kind of career he had. So, again, it was one of those experiences, and I've had a lot of them where it's how did I get here moment? Like 1989, I graduate from Western. 1990, I'm in Barrie. 1991, I'm at CJCL, but I'm doing sportscasts. 1992, I'm doing talk shows. In 1993, I'm doing primetime sports. Like it was fast. Um, and as I look back in hindsight now, it seems even faster. A lot of opportunities came my way, and a lot of that was just good timing. The fan transitioning into an all sports station. I got to go to the 1994 Olympics and do the 1994 World Championship of Basketball. John Shannon hired me to do both of those, and that was just kind of a quirky stroke of luck that I was the guy that he wanted, and that had a huge impact on my future career. So I was just eager to learn everything I could learn back then, and Bob, was obviously one of the guys I learned a lot from.
Okay, what made you think it would be a good idea to try out for that Jays gig?
So Jim Hewson, the great Jim Hewson, was doing hockey and baseball at the time. So this is now, let's call it November of 94. So remember, no World Series in 94. Baseball ends without a
Right.
World Series because the strike is on, right? And Jim decides, I think, to move back to Vancouver and to focus on hockey and not to do two sports. I don't remember, honest to God, and people who know me well will tell you this is my brain. I don't remember if somebody called me or if I called them. To say, "Hey, I'd like to audition." I don't know, but I did, and I went in and auditioned. Let's call it November of '94. So I go into TSN, who at the time that's who Jim Houston was calling games for. Back then,
Yep.
as you probably remember, there were three different entities, three different networks that split the Blue Jay pack. TSN had the biggest chunk of it. They had 80 games. And I go in to call a game, and Buck Martinez is the analyst then and now, and Buck's sitting there at TSN. And I knew in advance, and again, I don't know how they sent it to me. Maybe they couriered it to me. We called a game from earlier in the '94 season, a game that Buck had called when it actually happened. It was a game between the Royals and the Blue Jays. So I guess they mailed me or couriered me the game notes from that day. Uh,
Yeah.
but I didn't know what happened in the game. Like, again, no internet, right? So I guess I could have looked it up, or I think I avoided looking it up, or I don't even know how I would have looked it up. But the funny part about the game, Joe, is nothing happened. It was a 1-0 game as far as my memory serves. Kevin Apier and Pat Henkin. And we did 6 innings of the game. Like, both guys struck out like 11. Nothing happened in the whole game. And I went and I was sick too. I was sick as a dog, like coughing and wheezing and all that. And I called the 6 innings, and we were just doing it, with a big TV in front of us. And little did I know
Yeah.
that up in the corner offices, like I was so young and naive, green, the bosses were watching. I didn't know that. And so I do it, and I say thank you very much. And then I got invited up to the corner offices for a conversation. We had a conversation, and I got a "We'll be in touch." And I said, "Great." And like a week later, I got a call, and they said, "You didn't get the job." And I said, "Okay," because I didn't expect to get the job. I was
Right.
27 years old. 27 years old, and
Yeah.
I had done by that point. I had done the Olympics on CTV for hockey, and I had done the World Championship of Basketball, like I said, that John Shannon hired me for basketball. So I had done a little play-by-play, and incredibly enough, it was on CTV, but on a national network. But that's because they had the Olympic rights for Lillehammer, and CBC had all the announcers, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I just caught a huge break. They needed a guy, and John Shannon, who I had collaborated with a little bit, I guess, on the fan stuff and being around the Leafs a little bit. So he hired me. So I had a little play-by-play, but in my life before that audition, I had done 1 inning of baseball play-by-play, and it was in the spring training of '93 or '94 when I was down there covering it for the Fan. And Tom Cheek Jerry Howarth, said to me, "Hey kid, you want to do an inning?" And I did an inning, and I had done 1 inning of
Wow.
baseball play-by-play before the audition. Never in a billion years could you get a job like that with that little experience. No, never, ever, ever. So they called me and said, "You didn't get the job." And I said, "Okay." And then, like in January, February, like a couple of months later, whoever it was called me back and said, "Are you still interested?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "Come on in." And I don't know who they hired or tried to hire, or I don't know what happened, honestly. But I got the job a couple of months later. Every job I've ever gotten, I was never the first choice, and I never got it initially, and that kind of stuff. So, but who cares, right? You got it. So say in February of '95, TSN hired me to be the play-by-play announcer for the Blue Jays, and the I've had 3 enormous breaks in my life. We might get to the third. One was Scott Metcalf working with me as much as he did. 2 was TSN taking a chance on me to be the Blue Jays announcer, as inexperienced as I was. And maybe we'll get to the third one later. But yeah, that was a life-changing, obviously, life-changing moment for me. I left the Fan, and from that point forward, really wasn't a radio talk show host anymore. Became a play-by-play guy.
Okay, so we have a clip from TSN,
Oh
circa
God.
maybe '98, I think. Anyway, the Jays are trying to
Oh
stay in a
God.
playoff race at this point. Let's roll that,
Yeah.
Greg.
They've got an outstanding shot at it. Boston way back in second, and the Blue Jays behind them in third. Baltimore has dropped to fourth. The Yankees have really made a mockery of what was considered to be, and it may still be, the best division in all of baseball. Now for the Blue Jays, how tough a loss is that last night? Does that blow away all their momentum?
No, I don't think it really does. The Red Sox lost, as we know, to the Yankees, and the Blue Jays are still 4.5 back, and it's an important game for them tonight because just as we saw last time, the first game of a 4-game series can really set the tone.
A matchup we've seen before in the last couple of years.
What are your thoughts when you see that kid?
Well, 2 things. One, I don't sound the same as I do now, and I don't understand it. Because I've seen that clip, and I've had people play that clip for me to mock me. 2 is, why did nobody say to me, "Danny, shave your head. You're losing the battle. Just let it go." I should have done it years earlier. Yeah, but I don't know. That's somewhere in the mid to late '90s. Black blazer, yellow crest, the old days, and it was great. I did Jays games for 7 years for TSN before I went to ESPN full time, and another huge break I got was Buck being the guy that I worked with. I mean, he taught me so much about baseball and so much about TV. And one of the first things I remember him saying, and we were probably sitting at a bar having a beer when he said it. He said, "If we can sound like we're sitting at a bar having a beer when we're calling a baseball game, we'll be okay." And again, he's the guy I had done the audition with. And we just had this chemistry, honestly, from day one, Joe. And we didn't know each other. We barely knew each other. Like maybe I'd had him on my show once on the Fan or something like that. But we just had this immediate chemistry, this ability to know. I knew what he was thinking. He knew what I was thinking. Neither one of us cared who said that great nugget on the air. It didn't matter to either one of us. No egos between us. And it just clicked right away. So I was with TSN for 7 years, with Buck for the first 6, and then he was the manager in 2001. So Pat Tabler moved into the booth in 2001. So, but all of a sudden, I was a major league play-by-play announcer, and from out of nowhere. And if I thought things were moving fast in the few years prior, I mean, that's when things kind of really just really got going for me, and it was wonderful. It was a very, very exciting time.
Okay, we have another clip from the booth. Vic, if you can roll that.
You got it. I told you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
You still got it, my man.
got it.
Wow.
Okay.
I could always catch. I couldn't hit. Yeah.
So that's a situation where Buck must have made an amazing catch, because we didn't see the catch itself, but we heard the reaction to it afterwards. You got pretty excited about that. What kind of play was it? Do you recall?
I don't recall, to be honest with you, but I think that's 2016, because my first year when I came back was 2016, and I think that was the only year all 3 of us were in the booth together, and you could see Tabby there. As well. That was Yankee Stadium. So I don't remember the moment, to be honest with you, but obviously he made a great catch. We don't get foul balls in the booth at the Rogers Center. There's been maybe 1 or 2 over the years. We're just too high up, but at other ballparks, they can get in there, and they can get in there fast. So you always have to have your wits about you. Old Tiger Stadium, where Buck and I worked a lot together back in the '90s, which was is and will always be my favorite. I think my favorite ballpark to go to. I just loved Old Tiger Stadium. We were incredibly close to the plate. And on the back wall, you could see like this cork board, and it looked like somebody had taken a machine gun to it, shot holes in it, but those were baseballs that had just hit it because they came back in the
Wow.
booth so much. Various announcers would call games with a glove on or with a net or something in front of them. So um, baseball is fun because crazy stuff happens. In basketball, football, and hockey, because the action is tighter or faster, or there's a clock or whatever you want to say. It's less weird stuff happens in other sports. Weird stuff happens in baseball, and I've always been a fan of sharing that with people at home. If something silly happens, tell them what it is. If something serious happens, tell them what it is. If I make a mistake, own up to the mistake. It's okay to laugh. I don't think I'm ever accused of being too silly on the air, but it's okay to have some laughs and to celebrate a great catch by Buck in the booth or something like that. So I haven't seen that one, so I'm glad you found that one.
Well, let's look, we're going to skip over a few here, Vic, and look at another weird play. This is Jays at Fenway a couple of years back, and it's Raimel Tapia at the plate. Let's listen to that call from Dan.
Sends a drive to deep center, but where is it? It's way over the head of Duran, who never saw it. He never saw it. Tapia around third, heading home. And inside the park, grand slam for Raimel Tapia.
So you talk about weird stuff happening during a baseball game,
Yeah.
and you never know how things are going to unfold. Is that one of the weirdest ones that you can recall?
Well, that game was one of the weirdest ones. I think the score was 28-5, if I'm not mistaken. And I believe the major league record for runs is 30. And I think Danny Jansen had a chance to tie it or break it in the ninth inning if he had hit a home run. But that was just one of those crazy games that year where the Blue Jays scored a zillion runs. And Boston was bad, and it was one of those nights you couldn't see the ball. It was gloomy or whatever it was. And yeah, inside the park grand slams are pretty rare. Unassisted triple plays, no hitters, inside the park grand slams might be even rarer than those. So, yeah, weird stuff. Weird stuff happens, and part of the beauty, but also part of the challenge of being a play-by-play announcer is it's live. There's no script. I mean, I had done sportscasts, I had written sportscasts and rehearsed sportscasts and done them. Obviously, you get into play-by-play. There's no script, and once you say it, it's out there. So you kind of always got to be paying attention and on your toes because you never know what's going to happen.
Well, I want to get back to working with Buck for a second here because I remember a story. I don't know if it's true or not, but after your audition with Buck, I think after you left, word has it that he turned to the boss and who was there with the audition and said, "He's your guy. He's your guy." Is there truth to that?
I believe that's true. You'd have to ask him.
Yeah.
But again, they didn't offer me the job right away.
Yeah, right.
I didn't get it till a couple of months later, so I guess
Right.
Buck's opinion didn't hold a whole lot of sway. But I am told that's true. But you'd have to ask Buck. But if he said that, that's very kind of him. Again, I was so inexperienced. I had a baseball background. Again, I was doing a ton of the pre and post game shows. You'll remember Scott Ferguson, of course, who did the Major League Report and Baseball Today. I filled in for Fergie and did a lot of those, and I filled in for Bob and did a lot of the Jays talk. So I was around the team a lot, and I loved baseball. And you know what? That goes back to my statistics brain. I think I loved the numbers of baseball back then, and so I think I had a pretty good, not a fantastic, but a pretty good baseball foundation. I learned over the years how much more I had to learn, but I think I had a pretty good baseball foundation. And as you know, some guys just have a better sound for some sports. Like I don't know if I could do. I do some sports better than I do others. And some people,
Yeah.
if you say to some people, what's easier, baseball or hockey? Some people would say, oh, baseball, and it's not even close. And some people would say, oh, hockey, and it's not even close. It just kind of depends on what you're more comfortable with, the content, the pace of the game, that sort of stuff. I always loved talking about baseball and was and still am very happy to be conversational about it or during a game. So I guess I was just lucky that fate found me and put me in the right chair at the right time.
And okay, speaking of fate, tell us about the gig with ESPN, how that came about.
Well, that's another funny story. So that's the third moment. So We're going to back up in time here before TSN. I'm still at the Fan, say 1993, and I walk out of my 11 p.m. sportscast. I don't even think I'm doing primetime sports or anything like that yet. I'm doing sportscast, and I walk out and the phone rings in the newsroom, and I pick it up, and there's a voice on the other end that says, "Is this Dan?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "My name is Al Jaffe, and I work for ESPN, and I'd like to talk to you about auditioning for our radio network." And I thought it was my university roommate, Rob, playing a joke on me, going back to my CHRW days at Western when they would prank me and stuff. And I said, "That's pretty good, Rob." I said, "You gave yourself a decent New York accent then." And there's silence on the other end of the phone. and and in that moment, I'm like, "Oh." And then the voice starts again, and he says, "I'm going to say this one more time. My name is Al Jaffe." And I went, "Oh, damn." And I was still a little suspicious. So this is all true. I swear to God. I was still a little suspicious. So I said, "Al, I've got one more sportscast to do. Can I call you right after the next one?" And he said, "Yes." And this was my way of trying to figure out if he was legit. I said, "Give me your number and I'll call you right back." And at the time, it was a 203 area number. It's 860 now, but it was a 203.
Yeah.
So I said, "Okay, I got him. Either he's real or this phone call's not going anywhere." So I called him after my next sportscast, and he picked up the phone. So the story was CJCL was still on 1430 then. It wasn't even on 590. And again, no internet, kids. You got to keep that in mind always. He's in Connecticut, and he's been told there's a talented young radio host, I guess, on a station in Albany or Syracuse. I don't know where. And apparently the signal of that station was like 1420. And back then, this is how you got your radio stations. You turned the dial.
Yeah.
And he accidentally got me in Toronto from Connecticut and heard me and called me. And a week or two later, I was on a plane down to Connecticut. ESPN radio had just started like a couple of months before, and it was not a 24/7 thing. They did Saturday, Sunday morning talk shows. So this is the third of my 3 times where I had 2 different jobs. I was working at the Fan Monday to Friday, and I went down to ESPN and did radio for them Saturday, Sunday. So that was my entree to ESPN. I did that for about 18 months. And then when I got the Jays job, I had to give up both radio jobs because they just, couldn't do both. And another lucky thing for me, Buck at the time also was doing some ESPN baseball games when we weren't doing them on TSN. So I think through radio and through Buck, ESPN just kind of had a little knowledge of who I was. So fast forward to like September of 95, my first year doing the Blue Jays. And we're in New York, and I think we were doing the Tuesday and the Thursday game, but we weren't doing the Wednesday game. This was common. Like one of the other networks was doing that game. So I had a day off. So I get back from the game Tuesday night to my hotel room, and the message light is flashing. And I don't have a cell phone then. It's 1995. This is how you talk. This is how you communicate with people. So I pick up the phone, and there's a message from, "Hi, Dan. My name is Jed Drake. I'm the coordinating producer of baseball at ESPN. Please give me a call immediately. Here's my number." It's like 11:30 at night. Like we've just gotten back from the Jays game. I don't know what to do, but he said, "Please give me a call immediately." So I gave him a call. He said, I can't remember who, but another one of their announcers had called in sick. And we know, I guess they knew I wasn't working, although Buck wasn't on the game they asked me to do. He goes, "Can you go to Kansas City tomorrow and do the game?" And I said, "Sure." And I think it was the Angels and the Royals. The next day, I woke up and went to an airport and got a paper ticket and flew. And I didn't have, again, no internet. I didn't know who was pitching. I hadn't studied the rosters. And I did the Angels and the Royals one Wednesday night in September for ESPN, and then went back to New York Thursday and did the Blue Jays and Yankees. And was incredibly nervous, like Albert Brooks sweating nervous, like that nervous. And did the game and got a call saying, "Thank you very much." And I said, "You're welcome." And then about a month later, say in October of 95, I got a call from a gentleman named Dave Miller. He said, "I'm the coordinating." No, I'm sorry. I got a call from somebody else who said, "Just off chance, do you do any other sports?" And I said, "Well, I've done some basketball." And then I got a call from Dave Miller who said, "I'm the coordinating producer of college basketball. Can you send me a tape? So I got a VHS tape of that World Championship of basketball I had done the previous year in Toronto, sent it down to ESPN, and 2 weeks later they called me and said, "Would you like to do college basketball for ESPN?" And again, my life changed. So then I was Blue Jays in the summer and college basketball in the winter. And I had done a little hockey, junior hockey and NHL for TSN, and I'd done a little bit of Raptors and Grizzlies for TSN, but just a little bit. And ESPN offered me a college basketball job. So now I was Jays in the summer and college basketball in the winter. And lo and behold, after doing a million other things, that's what I am now all these years later. I've kind of gone back to where I was back in the late 90s.
Well, as an getting that gig at ESPN, getting to call Sunday Night Baseball and everything else, you get a chance to make some of the greatest calls and the biggest games in baseball history. Vic, let's roll some of those calls. These are radio calls that you made, World Series calls.
And for the third time in 5 seasons, the San Francisco Giants are the champions of the baseball world. And the Kansas City Royals have won the World Series. And the Cubs have won the World Series. For the first time in 108 years, the Chicago Cubs are World Series champions.
Okay, when I hear that, I get shivers. Like 108 years. What was that calling that game like for you?
Well, calling the World Series. So during the regular season for ESPN for many, many years, I did TV, but we didn't have TV rights in the postseason. We had all the radio rights. So I switched over to radio. And for the last 12 years, ending last year, I was fortunate enough to call the World Series for ESPN radio. So my first one was 2011 when the Cardinals beat the Rangers. My last one was last year. And, the Cubs one does stand out, obviously, because it hadn't happened in over a century. So those moments are some of my favorites of my entire career. Baseball is a beautiful radio sport, a wonderful radio sport. And to be able to do the World Series on the radio was fantastic. And you think of all the different teams that won it over the years. So I did Red Sox and Giants and Astros and Cubs and Dodgers and Nationals, Braves. So it was it was great. Very, very, very special moments and wonderful memories.
Okay, back to the Blue Jays now for a minute. This is one of my favorite Blue Jay moments. I'm sure a lot of people agree with this. I was at the in the press box that day when this happened. You got a chance to call this game. It's Game 5 of the ALDS Jays and Rangers, and let's listen to that, Vic.
1-1. Bautista drives it deep left field. Gone. Suddenly it is 6-3 for Toronto. The Blue Jays dugout has erupted as they greet Bautista at the edge of the track.
So, have you ever seen the place like that before? Have you ever seen a building like that before?
No. I'll tell you 2 funny stories if you want. So, again, that's for ESPN radio. Most people in Canada are like, why was Dan called that game? Like, people in Canada either watched the game on TV, U.S. national TV, or they heard Jerry Howarth call that home run on the radio. So I was doing the playoffs for ESPN radio, and I think I was in Chicago the night before doing the Cardinals and Cubs, and my series ended. And I was in a taxi on my way back to the hotel, and my boss, John Martin, called me and he said, "What are you doing tomorrow?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to the Blue Jay game." I had bought tickets for my family, but if I was there, I was going to use one of the tickets. And he said, "Can you call the game?" He said, "ESPN took Dave, I think it was Dave Fleming, took Dave Fleming off the game. They needed him for a college football game on TV. We don't have an announcer. Can you do Game 5 tomorrow?" I said, "Hell yeah, I can do that game." So I flew home and got parachuted in just for Game 5 of that series. I had not done the first 4 games of that series because I was on the Cardinals and the Cubs. So I did the game with Rick Sutcliffe. Then the other thing, yes, it was the most intense sporting moment I've ever been at. That whole inning. I mean, it started in the top half of the inning, and you were there, so when Russell Martin's throw hit Shin-Soo Choo's bat,
Yes.
and a run scored, and they littered the field with bottles, which was terrible. But, there was a feeling of, well, nobody wants the Blue Jays to win. The U.S. TV networks don't want us to win. The umpires are out to get us.
Uh-huh.
none of which was
Yeah.
true. It was that was the rule. They did the right thing. The run should have scored. But that moment when Bautista hit that home run, to me, was 22 years of emotion and frustration erupting out of Blue Jay fans. So that inning, top and bottom, was the most intense thing I was ever at. I had bought 4 tickets. I guess I had bought 4 tickets for the playoff series. So my mom and dad and 2 of my sons were at the game. And in the top half of the inning, I texted them and I said, "Do not leave the ballpark." I said, "I'm going to come get you. Like, there might be a riot outside," when all hell was breaking loose.
Yes.
And then after
yes.
Bautista homered, I sent a text to all of them and I said, "We're good. I'll see you at home. It's okay. Everything's going to be fine." So, that's another if people say to me, "What are your most, what are your top favorite moments from your career?" That's always in my top 3 or 4. And again, it was just a total fluke that I wound up on that game.
Okay, I want to go back to to basketball now. You talked about your college basketball years and calling college basketball. We have a clip of you calling a game between Georgia Tech and Duke, I believe 2010, and Kyle Singler comes and pays you a little visit.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at that.
30 years in college basketball, Glenn Rice has got to be on the short list of one of the best college shooters you've seen.
Absolutely. No question about it. And what a team they had. Oh, wow. Take the charge, Dad. Take the charge, buddy. Hey, Dad, you got the charge. I'll give you a charge. Charge, baby. Charge.
So tell us exactly what happened. We're going to watch you get.
I got smoked
Get
is
it
what
together.
happened. So
Yeah,
Kyle
yeah,
Singler's chasing down the loose ball. If this runs further, you might see another angle that shows it a little bit better. And he dove to save the loose ball, which he did. The game kept going. The whistle did not blow until at this point, as you can see. Here you'll see it. And he saves the ball, and he has no choice, and he lands right on top of it. And I think broke the chair, like the legs of the chair broke the headset, the TV monitor. You can see like it's a yard sale. And I thought I stood in there pretty good, for maybe that's a little Canada tough background or something like that. But he could not have hit me more directly if he tried. And I was like, why couldn't it be a 6'1" guard? Why does it have to be a 6'8" forward who comes and gets me? But that's the legendary Dick Vitale right there, who I was working with. And my mic was out, so Dick didn't know what to say. So over and over, he just kept saying, "Oh, he took the charge.
Take the charge, Dad."
He said it for 30 seconds. He didn't know what else to say. But yeah, that was crazy. So we had a spare headset, and eventually they got us back on the air. In the Greensboro Gazette, I think it's called, the Greensboro newspaper the next day. That tournament was in Greensboro, North Carolina. In the newspaper the next day, the article said something like, like it had the game story, and then at the bottom it said, there was an interesting moment in the first half of the game when Kyle Singler of Duke almost ran over legendary broadcaster Dick Vitale. I'm not even mentioned in the story. I was the guy who So
you're
you're
the guy who took the charge. Come on.
That's ever happened.
Okay, so you called some basketball this summer, which is pretty awesome. Canada getting all the way to the semifinals, of course, winning the bronze medal. What was that Asian World Cup experience like for you?
It was wonderful. So Canada basketball has always been a passion of mine. And going back like 20 years with ESPN, I had a clause in my contract when I was doing full-time baseball for ESPN. I had to fight for it, but I got a clause in my contract with ESPN saying, if the Canadian men's basketball team ever qualifies for the Summer Olympics, you'll give me 2 weeks off to do the Olympics if somebody in Canada offers me the opportunity to do it. So they never made the Olympics, so it never happened. But that's just to point out that this is something I've always loved. I've done a little bit more Canada basketball, I think, than people realize. Unfortunately, it's never when Canada's won. When they lost that heartbreaker to Venezuela in the FIBA Americas to go to the 2016 Olympics, that was me. When they lost in Victoria to the Czech Republic a couple of years ago to go to the Tokyo Olympics, that was me. And then I did the Olympics for CBC last year. Our women's team was in it, but the men's team was not. So I've always wanted to do whatever Canada basketball was on TV, but most of it was always just streaming it wasn't carried on TV. So Sportsnet, Bart Yabsley, who was one of my bosses at the time with Sportsnet, did a deal with Canada Basketball to televise any and all available Canada basketball games. And so when I found out that, I begged and pleaded. I said, "Can I do this?" And the World Cup obviously was huge. Everybody knows, the hype around the program. Can the men get to the Olympics? And I was thrilled to do it. I wasn't in Indonesia or the Philippines. I was doing the games remotely from Toronto. And as you may know, for about 9 or 10 days on, a few on both ends, I was overlapping doing Blue Jay games at night and Canada games at 4:30 or 8:30 in the morning because of the time change. And only the fact that it was in Indonesia and the Philippines allowed me to be able to do both. So, like some days I would wake up at 2:30 in the morning, do a game at 4:30, go back home and sleep at 7 and wake up at 10 and then go down to the ballpark, whatever. But I loved it. Loved it, loved it. I had so many people text me and say, "Dude, we had no idea you were in, this much into Canada basketball." And a lot of people out there in Canada I know didn't even know I ever did basketball because they don't watch US college basketball. So,
Right.
but I loved it and I thought it was an incredible journey that this team went on. To be down to France and come back and win, to be down to Spain in a must-win game and come back twice to win, to beat Slovenia, to beat the U.S. for bronze in overtime. It was honestly, Joe, it was as exciting as anything I've ever done. And I'll be calling the Olympics for CBC in next summer, and I can't wait.
Okay, well, let's listen to some of that overtime call against the United States.
Fade away, no. Tip by Powell. Dort has it, and back to Gilgeous-Alexander.
Both teams crashing offensive glass.
The three, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and it's a 5-point game.
How impressed were you by Shai? I mean, the little ankle breaker there, that was what a move.
Oh, yeah, I mean, first team All NBA, so we shouldn't have been shocked at how good he was, but he was phenomenal. It goes without saying, without him, they don't get anywhere near where they got. He took over so many games in the second half, and he's got such passion for it. And Corey Joseph was the face of the program, and wonderfully so for many, many, many years. Now it's Shai. And Shai's passion for it, and I think the player he is and the person he is draws in the other guys. Obviously RJ Barrett would be there. His dad is the GM, but Nickeil Alexander-Walker is a cousin of Shai's, and Dylan Brooks. Olynyk and Powell have played for Canada forever. Lou Dort, hopefully Jamal Murray next year, maybe some others as well. But Shai was incredible. He's one of the best players in the world. I mean, you can't count to 10 without getting to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander if you're talking about the best players in the world. And FIBA basketball is totally different than the NBA. And you could see for him, it took a little while through the exhibition games in the early part of the tournament to really, really get the feel for it. But once he did, he was Shai. And it's just fantastic. I thought the whole thing was fantastic. I know how many people were waiting BC in the middle of the night to watch games, and we're watching all across the country. And, the fact that they qualified for Paris out of this means instead of 8 or 9 months of anxiety, like can they make it in a last chance tournament? Now it's 8 or 9 months of momentum. And, a tip of the cap to everybody at Canada basketball and to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander for pulling a lot of these guys in.
Yeah, I got up early to watch that Spain game. Well worth it. Well worth it. So, what do you think these guys have a legitimate chance in Paris?
I think they have a legitimate chance to medal. I mean, the United States looks like it is loading up. The U.S. had a good team, but not a great U.S. team. They look like they're loading up. And in one game, anything can happen. But if Jokic is there, and it depends what countries are there too, right? If Giannis is there, if Wemby is there, we know Embiid now has said he's going to play for the U.S. Some of the teams will be stronger than they were in the World Cup. I think Canada's got a chance to do very well. I think to medal, realistically, they probably need a little bit more than they had at the World Cup. And again, I mentioned Jamal Murray. I mean, he's part of this program. He was one of the core 14 who committed, but he was coming off an ACL tear the year before and then an NBA championship into June this past year. if Jamal Murray wants to play, Jamal Murray's on the team. There are other guys I think they'd like to have, but again, they asked for a commitment. So guys who didn't commit a couple of years ago, I don't know if they will be given consideration. Andrew Wiggins, for example, is a guy who falls into that group. I don't know if they will or they won't. But I think if they get Murray and they get one or two other guys, that will really help them. At the same time, they have said, Jordy Fernandez has said many times, they want to be loyal to the 12 guys who played for them in the World Cup, because they did so well. Yes, they'll definitely be competitive. Like, they're not going to finish 12th out of 12. But to have a chance to play for a medal, I think they've got to add a little bit to what they have.
I think Jamal plays, and I think that they got a real good shot at a medal. I'm with you on that one. So I just want to touch on the Jays season that just wrapped up before we let you go. And disappointing, in game one of that playoff series, you had Bo Bichette's decision to score, which some people will criticize. But I mean, in the moment, it's not a team that scores a lot of runs, so maybe why not try something? You got Barrios being pulled early. There's been a lot of talk about what happened there, whether that should have happened, or the analytics folks first. I know the fans are not don't seem to be happy with the analytics involved in that. Been a lot of pushback, and of course, Vlad Jr. getting picked off at second base. Bottom line, though, is the Jays scored one run in 18 innings, and that's a problem. Is that the problem going forward? Is that Dan, the general manager? Is that what Dan's fixing?
I think there are a few issues they have to fix, but I think the biggest one is the offense. They just didn't score enough runs. And let's assume that Belt and Chapman and Kiermaier and Merrifield are not going to be back, so they've got some holes to fill as well. They got to go out and get some guys, and they have to hope that some of the guys from the system are ready to contribute. Like, I think Davis Schneider gets a real chance to be a real guy on this team next year. I don't know if Aurelvis Martinez and Addison Barger are ready yet, but does Nathan Lucas get more of a chance? They've got to get some help from the system as well. They had as good a pitching staff as there was in baseball this year, and there's no guarantee that'll happen next year. They got some guys in their 30s. So hopefully the pitching is as good, but the offense has to be better. I don't know. It sounds like they go back to the drawing board and say, okay, are we giving these guys the right information? Are we giving these guys the right approach? Like, the whole seemed to be less than the sum of the parts for the Blue Jays this year offensively. But some of the guys who they still have and have had for multiple years are the guys who dropped off. Vladdy dropped. We all know there's more in Vladdy. George Springer dropped off. Alejandro Kirk dropped off. Dalton Varsho didn't have the year he had before with Arizona. They got to find a way, hopefully, to get a little bit more out of each of these guys to help make up for the guys they've lost. And then there's not a ton on the free agent market. Maybe they'll get somebody, but I think it's possible a big trade is coming in order to hopefully offense.
So, how cool is it to have your son Ben follow in your footsteps as a broadcaster? We actually have a little something from Ben from Syracuse when he was there. Let's roll that.
Oh, okay.
Thanks so much for joining us today at
let's hear it.
on the campus of Syracuse University, alongside the former All-American and SU star Tracy Parker. I'm Ben Shulman. Tracy, both these teams have gotten their first game against Sacred Heart out of the way. For Syracuse, this is a major test now in an America East foe in Vermont. Here's Syracuse's chance. 2-0 for the Orange. Malotny shoots, save, rebound, saved again! Pasechnik stands tall.
Aladdin Moye now guarding the man on the ball. That's Nakai Montgomery, who was caught on defense for Syracuse's first goal of the game. Montgomery breaks right, shoots, a bouncer.
So there you go. Just like Daddy does it all, right? But of course, he's doing the Jays now, which is very, very, very awesome. And he's doing a great job.
Yeah, it's very fun for me. So he went to Syracuse. He's known since he was about 10 years old. He wanted to be a broadcaster. At Syracuse, he did about 6 or 7 different sports. And when he graduated as a foreign student, and if you go to a U.S., get a 1-year work visa off the back end of your studies. So during that year, he did some stuff like for the ACC network, ESPN Plus, their streaming network. He did some women's basketball, men's basketball, did a couple of football games. As we saw there, he's done other sports too. He's a versatile kid. Right now, he was kind of the fill-in play-by-play guy for the Blue Jays when Ben Wagner wasn't there. He did about 30 games on the radio, did some pre- and post-game shows. and he's going to be doing for the second year in a row games for the Raptors 905, their G League team this
Wow.
winter. So I'm very happy for him. He's loving it. He's having a good time. I told him he can have my job, but he needs to wait about 10 more years, and then he can have it. So, but he's off to a good start, and I think I don't know where he's going to wind up and what he's going to do, but I think he's going to have a nice career.
Oh, no doubt about it. Yeah, good-looking kid too, by the way. So your dad wins the Jack Graney Award, finalist for the Ford C. Frick Award. How cool was that to be honored by the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame and almost get that award? Interestingly enough, the winner of the Ford C. Frick Award was Jack Graney.
You're right. Yeah,
posthumously, of course.
It's wonderful to be acknowledged by people in the, your peers, people in the business. So very, very honored by both. To get the media award for the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame was wonderful. And then the nomination for the Ford Frick Award came a few years ago. It's funny because you can be on they've changed the way the award works, so you can be on 1 year and off, and then on and then off, and it was a complete bolt out of the blue. I had no idea about the being nominated for the Ford Frick Award. It was back in 2020, and I remember that because I had just come back from being in the U.S. for about 2 months working for ESPN, because you couldn't it was during COVID. Couldn't go back and forth across the border. And when I came back to Toronto, I had to quarantine for 2 weeks. So I was in an apartment downtown. I couldn't come home because of my wife and son, and then they wouldn't be able to go out. So I remember I was just like sitting in this apartment trying not to go crazy for 2 weeks, and the phone rang, and that's how I found out that I was nominated. So both very special and gratifying. I didn't get into the business. Like, I got into the business, like I said, because I wanted to do something I enjoyed, because my dad looked tense on Sunday night. So that's what I try to always think about, is just have fun doing this. But both of those meant a lot.
And very enjoyable Sunday nights. One final question before I let you go. What's the best advice you've ever received?
Well, I'll tell you the 2 bits of advice I give, so I must have received them. One is don't get into this business unless you're really prepared to work. Like, if you're getting into this to be rich and famous, get into something else. It's a lot of work. And 2, I would say, is be a good teammate. When we do a Blue Jays game on Sportsnet, there are probably 30 or 40 people working: audio, tape, cameras, technician, statistician, producer, director, you name it. They're all important. And just like, if you're a coach or a manager in sports, you want to make the most important you want to make the superstar and the fourth liner all feel important and all understand that they bring value. That's what you should do on a TV show as well. Try to get to know people's names, try to get to know what they do. Don't make it about yourself. Make it about being part of the best show that you can be a part of.
Well, that's why, in addition to being a great broadcaster, you're a great guy, Dan. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
I appreciate it, Joe. Great to see you and great to catch up. Why do I look older and you look younger? That's the one part I don't understand.
I don't understand it. I don't understand it. We don't know how that works, but it is what it is.
Good for you. Good for you.
Eat and roll.
All the best. Great
Thanks,
catching
buddy.
up with you.
Yeah, thank you so much. More sports when we come back.
You got it.
What our kids breathe matters more than ever. But how can you tell if a school is safe to breathe in? If you could actually see what's in the air, would you keep them home? Introducing Air Patrol, making the invisible visible, ensuring schools are safer for everyone. Breathe safely.
My Swiss pick of the week. Last week, I went with a beautiful Irish-bred Nation's Pride in the 84th running of the Canadian International Woodbine, 1.25 miles on the E.P. Taylor Turf Course. Nation's Pride, stablemate of Rico Woodbine Mile winner, Master of the Seas, got off to a good start. Jockey Bill Buick happened to be sitting second to Royal Champion, heading into the final turn. Time for the multiple graded stakes winner to make that move. Here's Robert Geller with the call.
Champions lead being whittled down gradually, a length and 3/4. Nation's Pride coming on. Nation's Pride coming with every stride, getting the leader now. And Nation's Pride's taken over and will come away and win the Canadian International. A very impressive display. And it's William Buick at Nation's Pride 2.5. Royal Champion at Gallant second, 6 away at Darmo third, then Palazzi English Conqueror starting over. British Royalty and Dyna Drive was last, 2:3:65.
Bill Buick, the winning rider of Nation's Pride, who tops the $3 million mark in earnings with that victory. Charles Appleby, the trainer for Godolphin Stables, who've had a heck of a run here in Canada. Let's hear from the winning trainer.
It's a race obviously we're very keen to support and be here, and thanks to everybody here at Woodbine for looking after us so well and being very supportive to us all. But for the horse's point of view, we felt that the conditions were there to suit him, apart from until the rain came. But we seem to have been following the rain a little bit the last couple of weeks. But the track conditions are there. It's a lovely long stretch, and that's something we knew he'd enjoy.
This week, I'm looking at Friday's 7th race at Woodbine, a mile at 1/16th on the Tapeta. The number 3 horse, Lady Brew, with Ryan Munger aboard for trainer Stephen Chirkop, coming off a nice win September 9th. She's been in the money 7 races in a row. I also like the 2, 3, 4 exactor and triactor box. Go to woodbine.com for all the latest racing info. Replays on YouTube. You can also get the latest from Woodbine Thoroughbred and Woodbine Standardbred on Instagram and X. Go to hpibet.com, darkhorsebets.com, and Bet365 for your wagering options.
Discover the finest patio experience in Toronto at the Stella Artois Terrace. Situated on the 3rd floor of Woodbine Racetrack, delight in mouth-watering shared appetizer and raise a toast to the evening. Relish expertly prepared main courses that will tantalize your taste buds. Capture the beauty of sunsets. Indulge in delectable desserts. Secure your reservation today and immerse yourself in the excitement of the races. Enjoy an unparalleled view of the thrilling finish line.
Well, it's a special place, and the food is great, the atmosphere, it's really a nice experience.
Experience the enchantment of Stella Artois Terrace. Open 4 days a week. Undoubtedly the city's premier patio destination.
Addiction Rehab Toronto, Toronto's #1 alcohol and drug treatment center, saving lives, reuniting families. The only treatment center in the province to offer medical detox, treatment, sober living, and lifetime aftercare all in one place. Our unique and specialized programs are designed to equip our clients with the tools to successfully lead a life of dignity, respect, and purpose. Let us help save your life or your loved one's life. Call today for more information or to facilitate an intervention. 1-855-787-2424 or visit addictionrehabtoronto.ca.
Attention security seekers. Ready to take control? Introducing Corporate Protection and Investigative Services, your ultimate solution. Retailers tired of losing profits to theft? Our retail loss prevention experts have you covered. Mobile patrol, close body protection, insured door persons, we've got your security needs covered from all angles. Background investigations and civil recovery programs, trust us for thorough solutions. Licensed by the Ministry of Solicitor General, fully insured and bonded. Visit www.corporateprotection.ca or call 1-800-827-1692 for top-notch security and private investigation services. MNP, a leading Canadian national accounting, tax, and business accounting firm. MNP proudly serves and responds to the need of their clients in the private, public, and nonprofit sectors. Through partner-led engagements, MNP provides a collaborative, cost-effective approach to do business and personal strategies to help people and organizations to succeed across the country and around the world. With local offices in Oshawa, Mississauga, Burlington, and more, their team is here to support you. Visit mnp.ca today to learn more. And we want to thank all the folks who make this show possible. These are friends, trusted business associates, and all-around great folks. We highly recommend them all. Thank you for your support of Canadian and local sports. A reminder that the show is available on iTunes, Spotify, Breaker, Radio Public, Google Podcasts, and Pocket Casts, as well as the Spanglish Network, Zingo TV, and Buzz TV Live. Also, check out the show on YouTube. All of our past great shows are on there. Some clips, some shorts. Like and subscribe. It is absolutely free. Thanks once again to Dan Shulman for being on the program. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Brian Gribben Insurance Planning, helping you solidify your financial future.
At BGIP, what we do that's unique in the marketplace is we show people how to spend and enjoy their money in the early years of retirement without the fear of running out. Also, we're able to do this without you having to change financial advisors. Please look us up at bgip.ca today. Let's book a 30-minute phone call to see how we can bring value to you and your family in your planning.
Call Brian today for all your retirement needs. We did. 905-686-5678.
Air quality at work matters more than ever, but there's no way to tell if a space is safe to breathe in. If you could actually see what's in the air, would you even come to work? Introducing Air Patrol, making the invisible visible, ensuring workplaces are safer for everyone. Breathe safely.
Rooted in 60 years of tradition, Sleepy Hollow is a private golf club with a friendly community of members just minutes from Toronto. With mature trees and rolling fairways, Sleepy Hollow provides a challenging and enjoyable experience for passionate golfers. Enjoy great golf, amazing dining, and a picturesque patio second to none. Visit SleepyHollowCountryClub.com. Hi there, I'm Joe Tilley. Are you ready for an adventure of a lifetime? Next March, during the enchanting cherry blossom season, join me and my wife for an unforgettable 2-week journey to Japan and South Korea. In Japan, you'll experience the magic of the season as we visit the stunning Osaka Castle against a backdrop of cherry blossoms. Feed the adorable Sika deer at Nara Park, glide through picturesque landscapes on the famed bullet train, cruise on Lake Kawaguchi, and witness the awe-inspiring view of Mount Fuji. Relax in natural hot springs and savor a delightful Fuji dinner banquet while dressing in traditional robes. And of course, we'll dive into Tokyo's cutting-edge technology scene. In Korea, dress in elegant hanbok attire and step back in time at Cheongdokgung Palace. Wander through Andong Village, a true glimpse into Korea's rich heritage. Delight your taste buds with the flavors of Korean barbecue. We'll even visit the DMZ area to get a glimpse of mysterious North Korea. And guess what? This incredible journey is all yours for just $54.99, all-inclusive, with direct flights from Vancouver, or $58.99 from Toronto. Book now to unlock up to an extra $1,700 in upgrades and savings. Let's make some memories. Let's explore. Let's travel. Guests on Joe Tilley Sports receive a gift certificate from Classica Imports. Top of the line imported men's clothing. Check out the Classica Essential Collection now. Go to shopclassica.com.